Millionaire discovers he had twins when he sees them crying at his own wife's grave. They call him father when they see that he is the man in the photo. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The cold wind swept through the vast expanse of Rose Hill Cemetery in Boston as Ethan Reynolds stood motionless before the freshly carved gravestone. His expensive black coat did little to shield him from the biting chill, but he barely noticed. The weight pressing against his chest was heavier than any storm. The name etched into the marble, Jessica Mitchell, felt like a wound reopened, bleeding with regret and sorrow. She had been gone for a week, and yet standing here, it still felt unreal. Ethan was not a man who let emotions control him. As CEO of Reynolds Enterprises, he had built his fortune on logic, sharp decision-making, and an unshakable will. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he was just a man who had lost something irreplaceable. Their love had started like a dream in the bustling streets of Boston. She was an artist, full of passion and dreams that had no boundaries. He was already on his way to becoming a self-made millionaire. Despite their differences, they had fallen deeply in love, but love alone was never enough. Their marriage suffered under the weight of his ambition. Business meetings replaced anniversaries. The love that once burned brightly dimmed with every broken promise. Eventually, she stopped waiting. One day, she walked out, leaving only a note. "I loved you, but I couldn't wait forever." That was 5 years ago. He never tried to bring her back. Not because he didn't love her, but because he believed he had already lost her. Now, standing at her grave, the guilt was suffocating. Had she been happy? Had she moved on? A muffled sob broke through the silence. Ethan stiffened. His eyes scanned the cemetery, sharp instincts kicking in. A few rows away stood two small figures, little girls no older than 7. They were dressed in simple jackets, their shoulders trembling as they cried. Something about them felt eerily familiar. He took a step forward, his shoes crunching against the gravel. The girls didn't notice him, too lost in their sorrow. One of them placed a single white flower on the grave. "Mommy, we miss you," she whispered. Ethan stopped breathing. His heart, which had been numb for years, suddenly began to race. "Mommy." His eyes darted between Jessica's gravestone and the children. They were calling her their mother. As he took another step closer, the girls turned to face him with wide, frightened eyes. But then the older one's expression changed. Her eyes widened in recognition as she pulled something from her pocket. A worn photograph. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice small but clear in the winter air. Ethan's world tilted beneath him as he stared at two faces that mirrored his own features. The same eyes, the same chin. A terrifying, impossible thought gripped him. Before he could speak, an elderly woman rushed toward them. "Charlotte, Olivia, what did I tell you about talking to strangers?" But the damage was done. The truth stood before him in the form of 2 little girls who looked too much like him to be a coincidence. Jessica had been pregnant when she left, and she never told him. Ethan stood frozen as the elderly woman led the girls away, his mind reeling with questions. The twins, his daughters, glanced back at him with curiosity and confusion before disappearing through the cemetery gates. Back in his penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, Ethan paced the floor, the plush carpet muffling his anxious footsteps. The floor-to-ceiling windows that usually provided a calming view of the city lights now seemed to mock him with their brilliance. His life, so carefully constructed and controlled, had just been shattered. "Karen," he barked into his phone, "I need everything you can find on Jessica Mitchell's life after our separation. Her address, employment history, medical records, everything." His assistant, accustomed to his demanding nature, didn't question the urgency. "Right away, Mr. Reynolds." Ethan collapsed into his leather chair, running his hands through his dark hair. How could Jessica have kept this from him? Twins. He had daughters. 2 little girls who had grown up without him, who had watched their mother suffer and die without ever knowing their father. His eyes fell on a photograph tucked away in his desk drawer, the only reminder he'd kept of Jessica. They looked so happy then, her laughing as he twirled her on a Boston boardwalk, both young and in love. Before his ambition had consumed everything, by morning Karen had delivered a comprehensive file. Ethan's stomach tightened as he read through the details of Jessica's life. She had moved to a modest apartment in Dorchester, working as a freelance graphic designer while raising the twins alone. No record of dating or remarriage. 4 months ago, she had been diagnosed with aggressive cancer. She had died alone. The last page contained information on Margaret Hayes, aged 67, Jessica's former art professor and closest friend, the woman from the cemetery. The file confirmed she was now the twins' guardian. Ethan's jaw clenched. This woman stood between him and his children he had every right to know. He grabbed his keys, determination replacing shock. Margaret Hayes lived in a small house in Jamaica Plain. It was time to get answers. As Ethan pulled up to bar, the modest brick home, doubt briefly flickered across his face. In boardrooms, he was invincible, but this was different. These weren't shareholders he could intimidate or business rivals he could outmaneuver. This was about family, a concept foreign to a man who had spent years isolating himself in work. He knocked firmly on the door, his heart pounding against his ribs. After a moment, the door opened slightly and Margaret's weary eyes met his. "I figured you'd come," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Come in." Inside, the living room was warm and cluttered. Children's books scattered on tables, small coats, hanging by the door. Photographs lined the mantel, Jessica with the twins at various ages, evidence of all he had missed. Margaret gestured for him to sit. "The girls are at school." "Their names?" Ethan asked, his voice rougher than intended. "Charlotte and Olivia. They're 7, Ethan calculated quickly. Jessica had been 2 months pregnant when she left. Why didn't she tell me? The question that had haunted him since yesterday. Margaret's eyes hardened. Because she was afraid you were too consumed with your empire to care about being a father. Her words hit like a physical blow. The worst part was Ethan couldn't deny them. Margaret's words hung heavily in the air. Ethan's fingers curled into fists, anger and guilt warring within him. That wasn't her decision to make, he said, his voice low. She took away my right to know my own daughters. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp with conviction. Can you honestly say she was wrong? Where were you all these years, Ethan? Did you ever try to find her? The accusation stung because it hit its mark. In 5 years, he'd made no real effort to locate Jessica, assuming she'd moved on and found happiness elsewhere. I want to be in their lives, Ethan said firmly. I'm their father. Margaret studied him for a long moment. They've just lost their mother. They need stability, not a stranger suddenly claiming to be their dad. Then let me get to know them, he countered, his voice softening. I don't want to disrupt their lives, but I need to be part of them. After a tense silence, Margaret sighed. I'll allow supervised visits, but I'm watching you, Ethan. One sign that you're going to hurt those girls and it's over. Relief flooded through him. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. 3 days later, Ethan found himself at Franklin Park, nervously waiting by the duck pond. He'd chosen casual clothes instead of his usual tailored suits, jeans and a sweater that made him look more approachable. When Margaret arrived with the twins, his breath caught. In daylight, their resemblance to him was even more striking. The same deep brown eyes, the same determined set of their chins. Girls, Margaret said gently. This is Mr. Reynolds. He was a friend of your mom's. Charlotte, wearing a pink jacket with butterfly pins in her hair, immediately stepped forward. Did you know Mommy well? She asked, curiosity brightening her eyes. Ethan crouched to her level, his heart pounding. Yes, I knew her very well, he said softly. A long time ago. Olivia remained half hidden behind Margaret, watching him with suspicious eyes. Unlike her sister, she seemed to sense there was more to this introduction. Would you like to feed the ducks? Ethan asked, holding up a paper bag of breadcrumbs he'd brought. Charlotte nodded eagerly while Olivia gave a hesitant shrug. Progress, however small. As they tossed crumbs into the water, Charlotte chattered away about school, her favorite books, and how she wanted to be an artist like her mom. Olivia remained quiet but gradually moved closer, her interest in the ducks overcoming her wariness. Mom used to bring us here. Olivia finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. She said the ducks were like people, all different but still a family. Ethan swallowed hard. These casual insights into Jessica's life with them were precious and painful. That sounds like something she would say, he managed, his voice thick with emotion. As they walked around the pond, Charlotte slipped her small hand into his, the gesture so natural it took his breath away. Olivia noticed and frowned, keeping close to Margaret. When it was time to leave, Charlotte asked the question he had been hoping for. Will we see you again? Ethan looked to Margaret, who gave a slight nod. Yes, he said, relief flooding through him. I'd like that very much. As they walked away, Ethan stood watching his daughters, one already opening her heart to him, the other still guarded. He had built an empire from nothing, but this would be his greatest challenge yet. And for the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for beyond business success. Over the next 3 weeks, Ethan gradually became a fixture in the twins' lives. Each meeting revealed more of their distinct personalities, Charlotte outgoing and eager to please, Olivia thoughtful and cautious. Today he waited outside their elementary school, a departure from their usual park meetings. Margaret had reluctantly agreed to let him pick them up, a sign of growing trust. When the bell rang, children poured out in a chaotic stream of backpacks and laughter. Charlotte spotted him first, her face lighting up as she ran toward him. Olivia followed more slowly, her expression guarded, but no longer hostile. You came, Charlotte exclaimed, throwing her arms around his waist. The gesture still caught him off guard, this unconditional affection he'd done nothing to earn. I promised I would, Ethan replied, awkwardly returning the hug. He nodded to Olivia. How was school? Fine, she answered, studying him carefully. Why are you picking us up? Where's Margaret? She had a doctor's appointment. I offered to take you for ice cream if that's okay. Charlotte bounced with excitement, but Olivia hesitated. We have homework. We can do it after, Charlotte insisted, tugging her sister's sleeve. Please, Liv. Something softened in Olivia's expression. She could never deny her twin. Okay. At the ice cream parlor, Charlotte devoured her rainbow sprinkle cone while Olivia methodically ate her mint chocolate chip, occasionally glancing at Ethan. Did you grow up in Boston? Olivia suddenly asked, catching him mid-bite. The personal question, her first, made his heart skip. No, I grew up in Springfield. I moved here for college and never left. What about your parents, our grandparents? Charlotte asked, ice cream dripping down her fingers. Ethan handed her a napkin, buying time. How much should he share? They live in Florida now. We don't talk much. Why not? Olivia pressed, her perceptiveness unnerving. Sometimes families have complicated relationships, he answered carefully. Olivia nodded like she understood far too well for a 7-year-old. Did you love our mom? Charlotte asked suddenly, her innocence making the question even more devastating. Ethan's throat tightened. Yes, I did. Very much. Then why? Olivia began, but Charlotte interrupted. Can we see your office sometime? Margaret said you have a big building downtown. The abrupt change of subject was a relief. Of course, if Margaret approves. Walking them home, Charlotte skipped ahead while Olivia fell into step beside him. Mom kept your picture, Olivia said, quietly, in her dresser drawer. Sometimes she would look at it when she thought we were sleeping. The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. All these years, Jessica had remembered him, perhaps even missed him. Thank you for telling me that, he managed. At Margaret's house, Charlotte hugged him goodbye without hesitation. Olivia didn't hug him but offered something unexpected instead, a small smile. "See you Thursday," she said. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. Driving back to his penthouse, Ethan realized his schedule would conflict. The quarterly board meeting was Thursday. 6 months ago, he would have canceled anything for that meeting. Without hesitation, he called his assistant. "Karen, reschedule the board meeting. Something more important came up." For the first time in his career, Ethan Reynolds was putting family before business. Ethan's office buzzed with speculation. For 3 weeks, the notoriously workaholic CEO had been leaving early, rescheduling meetings and declining business dinners. Behavior so uncharacteristic that his partner James finally confronted him. "What's going on with you?" James demanded, closing Ethan's office door. "The Singapore investors are getting nervous. You've missed 2 calls with them." Ethan looked up from his desk, where photographs of Charlotte and Olivia now sat alongside, spreadsheets. "Something personal came up." James raised an eyebrow, leaning against the desk. "Personal? You don't do personal. Not in 15 years. "Things change," Ethan replied, closing his laptop. "Today was Charlotte's art showcase at school. Nothing would make him miss it." "Is it a woman?" James pressed. Ethan hesitated. "It's family." Before James could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Art showcase starts in 30 minutes. Girl's looking for you." "I have to go," Ethan said, grabbing his jacket. "Handle the Singapore call. You know what they need to hear." James stared after him, bewildered by this transformation in his always predictable partner. At Lincoln Elementary, the gymnasium had been transformed into an art gallery. Children's drawings lined the walls, proud parents clutching programs and coffee cups. Ethan felt oddly out of place, the only man in an expensive suit among casually dressed families. He spotted them immediately. Charlotte waved frantically from beside her watercolor painting of a lighthouse. Olivia stood nearby, her posture tense as she watched him approach. "You came." Charlotte threw her arms around him, her enthusiasm unreserved as always. "I wouldn't miss it," Ethan assured her, surprising himself with how genuinely he meant it. Margaret nodded in acknowledgement, a silent approval of his punctuality. "Charlotte's been talking about nothing else all day. Come see my painting." Charlotte tugged his hand, leading him to her artwork. "It's the lighthouse at Cape Cod. Mom took us there once." The painting was unmistakably a child's work, but bursting with feeling. Ethan felt a swell of pride that caught him off guard. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "You have your mother's talent," Charlotte beamed. "Olivia's is even better. Show him, Liv." Olivia reluctantly led them to her drawing, a surprisingly detailed portrait of 2 girls holding hands. "It's us," Charlotte explained. "Me and Olivia." Ethan studied the drawing, noting the careful attention to their different expressions, Charlotte smiling widely, Olivia more reserved. "This is remarkable, Olivia. You've really captured both your personalities." A hint of pride crossed Olivia's face before she shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "It's okay." As they walked through the exhibition, Ethan noticed other parents, watching him curiously. He realized Margaret must have been the one attending these events all along. When Charlotte ran off to show her friend something, Olivia lingered beside him. "Mom used to come to these," she said quietly. She never missed one, even when she was sick. The simple statement carried the weight of accusation. "Where were you all those times?" "I wish I had been there," Ethan replied honestly. Olivia studied him, her eyes too perceptive for a 7-year-old. "Why are you here now?" Before he could answer, Charlotte returned, excitedly announcing her painting had won honorable mention. As they celebrated with ice cream afterward, Ethan realized how quickly these 2 little girls had become the center of his world. Somehow, between board meetings and business trips, they had taken root in his heart. And for the first time in years, Ethan Reynolds felt his priorities shifting irrevocably. Saturday morning found Ethan nervously pacing the entrance of the New England Aquarium. Today was significant. Margaret had finally allowed him to take the twins on an outing without her supervision, a sign of growing trust. He spotted them, approaching, Charlotte skipping ahead while Olivia walked more deliberately. Margaret gave him a pointed look that conveyed both warning and reluctant approval before saying goodbye to the girls. "Can we see the penguins first?" Charlotte asked, already tugging his hand toward the entrance. "Whatever you want," Ethan replied, his usual decisiveness abandoning him around these two small humans who had completely upended his carefully structured life. Inside, Charlotte darted from exhibit to exhibit, exclaiming over colorful fish and graceful rays. Olivia moved more methodically, reading information panels and watching each creature with quiet fascination. At the touch tank, Charlotte fearlessly plunged her hands in to stroke starfish, while Olivia hesitated. "It's okay if you don't want to," Ethan assured her. Olivia glanced up at him, then slowly extended her hand toward the water. Ethan gently guided her fingers to a smooth starfish. "It feels weird," she said, a small smile breaking through her, reserve. But cool. The moment felt significant, Olivia actually accepting his help. Later, they sat in the aquarium cafe, the girls devouring fish-shaped sandwiches while Ethan picked at his lunch, rehearsing words in his mind. Margaret had agreed it was time to tell them the truth, but finding the right moment seemed impossible. "Why don't you have kids?" Charlotte asked suddenly, catching him off guard. Ethan froze, his rehearsed speech evaporating. Olivia looked up too, equally curious. "Actually," he began, his heart pounding, "I do have children." Charlotte's eyes widened. "Really? Who?" The moment of truth had arrived unexpectedly. "You," he said softly. "Both of you." A heavy silence fell. Charlotte's sandwich remained suspended halfway to her mouth, while Olivia's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "You're our dad?" Charlotte whispered. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Yes. Your mom and I were married before you were born, but I didn't know about you until I saw you at the cemetery." Charlotte processed this with wide eyes. "So you're really our daddy? For real?" "Yes, for real." Charlotte's face broke into a radiant smile. "I knew it. You look like us. And you have the same wrinkle thing when you think." She pointed to her forehead. Ethan hadn't realized they shared this trait, this small physical echo binding them together. But Olivia's reaction was dramatically different. Her face had hardened, her small body rigid with tension. "No," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "You're lying." "Olivia, I'm not. If you're our dad, where were you?" she demanded, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom was sick and alone, and you weren't there." Charlotte looked between them, her excitement faltering. "I didn't know," Ethan tried to explain. "Your mom left before she knew she was pregnant. If I had known—" "You're not our dad," Olivia cut him off, pushing away from the table. "Our dad would have been there." She bolted toward the restrooms, leaving Ethan stunned by the force of her rejection. Charlotte touched his hand. "Olivia gets mad when she's sad," she explained with surprising wisdom. "Mom said we process feelings differently." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy. "Should I go after her?" Charlotte shook her head. "Give her a minute. That's what Mom always did." Sitting there, taking parenting advice from a 7-year-old, Ethan realized just how much he had to learn, and how much healing lay ahead for all of them. The drive back to Margaret's house was painfully quiet. Charlotte, trying to bridge the silence, chatted about penguins and sea turtles, but Olivia remained pressed against the car door, as far from Ethan as physically possible. "It'll be okay," Charlotte whispered to him when they stopped at a red light. Her innocent optimism made his chest ache. Margaret was waiting on the porch, her expression shifting to concern when she saw Olivia's tear-streaked face. The little girl ran straight to her, burying her face in Margaret's sweater. "I told them," Ethan explained quietly as Charlotte collected her backpack. Margaret nodded, stroking Olivia's hair. "Why don't you girls go inside? I need to talk to Ethan." Charlotte gave him a quick hug before disappearing inside. Olivia followed without looking back. "What happened?" Margaret asked once they were alone. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Charlotte took it well, Olivia. She doesn't believe me or doesn't want to. She's protective of Jessica's memory." Margaret sighed. And she's had more time to wonder about her absent father. Charlotte accepts things as they come, but Olivia holds on to hurt. What do I do? The question felt foreign on his lips. Ethan Reynolds asking for guidance instead of giving orders. Give her time and space, but don't give up. Margaret's voice softened. She needs to see you're not walking away again, even when it's hard. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood at his penthouse windows, the city lights blurring as he replayed Olivia's words. You weren't there. The truth of it was undeniable. His phone chimed with a message from Margaret. Charlotte wants to say goodnight. Their nightly video calls had become routine, but tonight he hadn't expected it. When he answered, Charlotte's face filled the screen, her hair damp from her bath. Hi, she said. I made sure to brush extra good because you said dentists are important. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. That's right, thank you for calling. Olivia doesn't want to talk, Charlotte said matter-of-factly. But I told her you're really our dad, and that means you love us even if you didn't know us before. Ethan's throat tightened. That's exactly right. Are you sad? Charlotte asked, noticing his expression. A little, he admitted. I wish I could make Olivia understand. Charlotte considered this seriously. Mom always said actions speak louder than words. Maybe you need to show her instead of telling her. From the mouth of babes. That's very wise advice. After they hung up, Ethan paced his living room, Charlotte's words echoing in his mind. Show, don't tell. But how? The answer came to him near dawn. He made 2 calls, one to his office canceling his meetings, another to a real estate agent. The next afternoon he arrived at Margaret's house with determination and a folder. I'd like to speak with Olivia if she's willing, he told Margaret. Olivia appeared reluctantly, keeping her distance, arms crossed defensively. I know you're angry, Ethan began, and you have every right to be. I wasn't there when you needed me. Olivia remained silent, but she didn't walk away. I can't change the past, he continued, but I can promise you this. I'm not going anywhere now. To prove it, he opened the folder, revealing property listings. I'm buying a house here, in Jamaica Plain. Close to your school, your friends, close to you and Charlotte. Surprise flickered across Olivia's face. What about your big fancy office? I can work from anywhere, he said simply. You girls are more important. Olivia studied him, conflict evident in her expression. Mom said, you always chose work over everything. The observation stung with its accuracy. She was right. But people can change, Olivia. I'm trying to. She didn't respond, but her posture relaxed slightly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A tiny crack in the wall she'd built. Take your time, he said gently. I'll be here when you're ready. 3 weeks after revealing his identity to the twins, Ethan found himself standing in an empty house in Jamaica Plain, imagining what it could become. The realtor had left him to feel the space, a concept he would have dismissed as nonsense a few months ago. Now he wandered through rooms bathed in afternoon sunlight, mentally placing furniture, picturing Charlotte's art on the walls, wondering which bedroom Olivia would choose. The house was nothing like his sleek downtown penthouse. It was older, with creaky hardwood floors and a backyard maple tree perfect for climbing. His phone rang. James calling for the 3rd time today. The Tokyo deal is falling apart, his partner said without preamble. They want you on a plane tomorrow. 6 months ago, Ethan would have been at the airport within hours. Send Victor instead. He knows the proposal better than anyone. They specifically asked for you. James's frustration was evident. What's happened to you, Ethan? This deal represents millions. Ethan looked out the window at 2 children riding bikes down the tree-lined street. Some things matter more than money. After hanging up, he texted Margaret. House hunting progress. Would like the girls' input. Dinner tonight? To his surprise, she agreed. That evening, as they walked through the house, Charlotte raced from room to room, exclaiming over window seats and closets. Even Olivia seemed curious, though she maintained careful distance from Ethan. This would be your room, he told her, showing a corner bedroom with built-in bookshelves. If you like it. Olivia ran her fingers along the shelves, her expression thoughtful. Mom always wanted bookshelves like these. The mention of Jessica no longer felt like an accusation. Progress. Later, over pizza in what would become the dining room, Charlotte declared the house perfect, while Olivia remained non-committal. Margaret, however, nodded her approval. It's a good neighborhood, she acknowledged, close to their school. When Charlotte wandered off to explore again, Olivia unexpectedly spoke directly to Ethan. Are you really giving up your fancy penthouse to live here? Yes, he answered simply. Why? Because I want to be near you and Charlotte. She studied him, searching for insincerity. What about your important job? I'll still work, he explained, but differently. Some things are more important. Olivia absorbed this, then asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. What about Margaret? The question caught him off guard. Of course she would worry about losing another caregiver. Margaret will always be part of your lives, he assured her. There's a garden apartment downstairs. If she wants it, it's hers. Margaret looked up in surprise. That's not necessary. It is, Ethan interrupted gently. You're their family too. Something in Olivia's expression shifted, a barely perceptible softening. Later, as they prepared to leave, Charlotte hugged him fiercely. When can we move in? Soon, he promised. We need furniture first. Can I pick my own? She asked excitedly. Of course. As Margaret ushered them toward the car, Olivia hung back. Mom had a yellow chair, she said quietly. It was her favorite. Margaret has it now. Ethan understood the unspoken request. We could find a place for it in the new house. Olivia nodded once, then turned to go. But at the door, she paused. Good night, Dad. The word, spoken so hesitantly, hit Ethan with unexpected force. He managed a smile past the lump in his throat. Good night, Olivia. It was just one word, but in that moment, it meant everything. Moving day arrived with unexpected emotions. Ethan had sold his penthouse without regret. It had never truly felt like home. But watching the twins say goodbye to Margaret's small house stirred something unexpected in him. This modest home had sheltered his daughters through their mother's illness and death. It held memories he would never share. You can visit any time, Margaret assured Charlotte, who was tearfully hugging her favorite reading nook. Olivia was quieter, methodically packing her books in careful stacks. When Ethan offered to help, she didn't refuse. Another small victory. Did you have a favorite book growing up? She asked unexpectedly, handing him a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. The personal question caught him off guard. My father didn't believe in fiction, he admitted, but I had a secret copy of Treasure Island I kept hidden under my mattress. Olivia considered this. Mom read to us every night even when she was too tired. There was no accusation in her tone this time, just a sharing of memory. Progress. At the new house, Charlotte immediately claimed her room and began directing movers with surprising authority. Olivia approached her own space more cautiously, arranging books on the built-in shelves, testing the window seat. Margaret supervised from the kitchen, organizing dishes with efficient movements. She had reluctantly accepted the garden apartment, though insisted on paying rent, a compromise Ethan respected. By evening, exhaustion had settled over everyone. They sat on new furniture surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, eating Chinese takeout from paper containers. To our new home, Ethan said, raising his water glass in a toast. Charlotte enthusiastically clinked her glass against his. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia joined in, her eyes meeting his briefly. Later, as Ethan tucked Charlotte into her new bed, she asked sleepily, Are you happy, Daddy? The title still sent a wave of emotion through him. Very happy, he assured her. I'm glad you found us, she murmured, drifting toward sleep. Even if it took a long time. In Olivia's room, the routine was different. She sat cross-legged on her bed, already in pajamas, watching him cautiously. Your room okay? He asked, lingering in the doorway. She nodded. I put Mom's picture on the nightstand. Ethan approached slowly, looking at the photograph. Jessica, laughing, her arms around much younger twins. His chest tightened at the sight of her face, still beautiful, still familiar despite the years. She had a great smile. He said softly, "You made her sad." The words weren't accusatory this time, just a statement of fact. "Yes," he acknowledged, "and that will always be my greatest regret." Olivia studied him, then reached under her pillow and pulled out another photograph, worn around the edges, creased from frequent handling. It showed a much younger Ethan and Jessica, arms around each other on Boston Harbor. "Mom kept this," she said. "She told us you weren't ready to be a daddy, but that you weren't a bad person." Ethan swallowed hard, taking the offered photo. She was right. I wasn't ready then. He looked at Olivia directly. "But I am now, if you'll let me try." Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slipped under her covers and turned to the wall, a clear dismissal. Ethan stood to leave, tucking the photograph in his pocket. "Good night, Olivia." As he reached the door, her voice stopped him. "Dad?" The word still sounded uncertain on her lips, but she'd offered it willingly this time. "Yes? I'm glad you're trying." It wasn't forgiveness, not quite. But as Ethan closed her door, he knew it was the beginning of something precious. Life in the new house settled into a tentative rhythm. Mornings were a whirlwind of breakfast, school preparations, and carefully coordinated schedules. Evenings featured homework at the kitchen table, Charlotte's endless chatter, and Olivia's gradually increasing engagement. Ethan had transformed his home office to accommodate video conferences, refusing business trips that would take him away for more than a day. The change puzzled his colleagues, but he remained firm. His priorities had shifted irreversibly. On this particular Tuesday, Ethan was reviewing quarterly reports when his phone rang. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. "Charlotte's sick," she said without preamble. "The school called. High fever. I'm picking her up now." An hour later, Ethan paced the hallway outside Charlotte's room where Margaret was taking her temperature again. 102.3, she reported, frowning. "It's gone up." Charlotte lay curled on her side, unusually quiet, her normally rosy cheeks flushed with fever. When Ethan touched her forehead, the heat radiating from her skin alarmed him. "Should we take her to the hospital?" he asked, unfamiliar panic rising in his chest. Margaret's expression softened. "Let's call her pediatrician first. Children get fevers, Ethan." But by evening, Charlotte's temperature had climbed to 103.8 and her breathing had become labored. The pediatrician's instructions were clear. Emergency room, immediately. Ethan carried her to the car, her small body burning against his chest. Olivia watched from the doorway, her face pale with worry. "Can I come?" she asked, her voice small. "You should stay with Margaret," Ethan began, but Charlotte weakly reached for her sister. "Want Liv," she mumbled. The sisters had never been separated. During a crisis, Ethan nodded, understanding. At the hospital, everything moved with frightening efficiency. Charlotte was whisked away for tests, leaving Ethan and Olivia in the waiting room. She sat rigidly beside him, her small hands clenched in her lap. "She'll be okay," Ethan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Olivia didn't respond, staring fixedly at the double doors where Charlotte had disappeared. "Mom was in a hospital too," she finally whispered. "She didn't come home." The fear behind her words struck Ethan like a physical blow. Of course, hospitals meant loss in Olivia's experience. "This is different," he said gently. "Charlotte has a high fever, but the doctors will help her." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes swimming with tears she was trying desperately to contain. "You promise?" "I promise," he said, praying he was right. The diagnosis came hours later. Severe pneumonia. Charlotte would need to stay overnight, possibly longer. As midnight approached, Ethan convinced Olivia to let Margaret take her home for sleep. She agreed only after extracting multiple promises that he would call if anything changed. Alone in Charlotte's hospital room, watching his daughter's fitful sleep, Ethan felt a wave of helplessness unlike anything in his business career. His wealth and influence meant nothing here. He couldn't negotiate with illness or leverage his way out of fear. When Charlotte stirred, crying out in her fever dream, he took her small hand in his. "Daddy's here," he whispered, the words feeling both foreign and deeply right. Her fingers tightened around his, and somehow he knew that even in her fever, she recognized his voice, his presence. Dawn found him still holding her hand, his back stiff from the uncomfortable chair. The nurse who came to check vitals smiled sympathetically. "Her fever's breaking," she said. "You must be doing something right." Ethan looked at his sleeping daughter, struck by a sudden overwhelming realization. Nothing in his life had ever mattered more than this moment, this child, this family he had nearly lost. For the first time, he truly understood what Jessica had meant in her goodbye note. Some things couldn't wait forever, but sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got a second chance. Retrial Charlotte's recovery was slower than expected. After 3 days in the hospital, she returned home weak, but improving. Ethan transformed the living room into a temporary bedroom, so she wouldn't have to climb stairs, filling it with stuffed animals and books. What surprised him most was Olivia's transformation. The crisis had shifted something in her. She hovered near her sister constantly, reading to her, adjusting her pillows, bringing her water. And remarkably, she had begun to rely on Ethan, asking his advice, updating him on Charlotte's temperature, working alongside him as a team. "She needs more medicine," Olivia announced one afternoon, checking the clock with serious attention. Ethan nodded, measuring the pink liquid carefully. "Thank you for remembering." After Charlotte took her medicine, Olivia settled beside her sister, with a book. Ethan turned to leave, but Olivia's voice stopped him. "Dad, could you stay and listen too?" The simple request filled him with unexpected emotion. "I'd like that." He sat in the armchair beside the makeshift bed, watching as Olivia read expressively, doing different voices for characters just as Jessica must have done for them. That night, after both girls were asleep, Margaret joined him in the kitchen. "You're doing well," she said, pouring herself tea. "Better than I expected." Ethan smiled tiredly. "High praise." "I mean it," Margaret insisted. "When you first showed up at the cemetery, I thought you'd lose interest once you realized how much work children are. I nearly lost Charlotte without ever really knowing her," Ethan said quietly. "I won't waste any more time." Margaret studied him over her teacup. "Jessica would be surprised," she admitted. "She always said you could never put anything above your work." The observation stung, but Ethan couldn't deny its truth. "I was different then, ambitious, driven, selfish," Margaret added bluntly. He nodded, accepting the assessment. "Yes, selfish." "And now?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Now, I understand what matters, what's worth fighting for." Margaret smiled slightly. "It's amazing what love can do to a person." Love. The word resonated through him. Yes, that's what this was. This fierce protectiveness, this constant concern, this joy in their smallest achievements. Love had transformed him more completely than any business success ever could. The next morning, Ethan was making breakfast when Olivia appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a small wooden box. "I want to show you something," she said, approaching with uncharacteristic hesitation. She placed the box on the counter and opened it carefully. Inside were small treasures, seashells, ticket stubs, a pressed flower, and beneath them, envelopes. "These are from Mom," Olivia explained, removing one. "She wrote us letters before she died, one for each birthday until we're 18. Ethan's hands stilled on the pancake batter. "That sounds like something she would do." Olivia nodded, tracing the envelope's edge. "She told us to read them when we miss her." She looked up at him. "I read mine a lot." "I'm sure they're very special." Olivia bit her lip, then pulled out another envelope, different from the others, slightly yellowed with age. "This one isn't for us," she said quietly. "It has your name on it." Ethan stared at the envelope she held out to him. His name in Jessica's handwriting. Elegant, familiar despite the years. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "It was in Mom's special box. Margaret gave it to us after." She didn't finish the sentence. "I should have given it to you before, but I was angry." Ethan took the envelope carefully, overwhelmed by its significance. "Thank you, Olivia," she nodded, gathering her treasures back into the box. But at the door she paused. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Mom wouldn't want us to be sad forever." With those words she slipped out, leaving Ethan holding the final message from the woman he had loved and lost. Ethan sat alone in his study, Jessica's letter trembling in his hands. He had been staring at the unopened envelope for nearly an hour, gathering courage to read her final words to him. Charlotte's illness had improved enough that she was back in her own room, both girls asleep upstairs. The house was quiet save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, marking time that Jessica no longer had. Finally, he carefully broke the seal and unfolded the pages covered in her familiar handwriting. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I'm gone, and you've somehow found our daughters. Our daughters. Even now, writing those words feels strange, knowing you don't know they exist. I've written and rewritten this letter 100 times over the years, sometimes in anger, sometimes in forgiveness, always in confusion. How do you explain to someone why you kept their children from them? The simplest answer is fear. Fear that you would see them as an inconvenience to your carefully planned life. Fear that you might reject them as you seemed to reject me. Fear that you might take them from me with your wealth and influence. But mostly, fear that you would be the same man who couldn't make room in his life for anything but success. Was I right to leave without telling you I was pregnant? I still don't know. The girls have your eyes, your determination. Charlotte has your smile. Olivia has your focus. Sometimes looking at them is like seeing you across the years. I've told them what I believe to be true, that you weren't ready to be a father, but that you aren't a bad man. I never wanted them to hate you, Ethan. Hate poisons the heart that carries it. If you're reading this, it means you want to know them. It means perhaps you've changed. I hope so. They deserve a father who sees them, truly sees them for the miracles they are. I'm entrusting the most precious part of myself to you. Please don't make me regret it from wherever I am now. Despite everything, I never stopped loving the man I believed you could become. Maybe now, you finally have. Jessica. Ethan folded the letter carefully, tears streaming unchecked down his face. The weight of her words, her fear, her hope settled in his chest. How different might their lives have been if he had been a different man then? If he had put love above ambition? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Olivia stood in the doorway, in her pajamas looking small and uncertain. "Are you crying?" she asked, approaching cautiously. Ethan didn't try to hide his tears. "Your mom's letter made me sad, and a little happy too. It's complicated." Olivia nodded as if this made perfect sense. "That's how I feel when I read her letters to me." She sat beside him on the couch, closer than she'd ever voluntarily been. "What did she say?" Olivia asked. Ethan considered how to answer. "She told me to take good care of you and Charlotte, and that she hoped I had become a better person." "Have you?" The directness of the question, so characteristic of Olivia, made him smile despite his tears. "I'm trying," he answered honestly. "Every day." Olivia seemed to accept this. She leaned slightly against his arm, the gesture so small yet so significant. "Mom made me promise to look after Charlotte," she said quietly. "But sometimes it's hard to be the strong one all the time." Understanding dawned on Ethan. Olivia had been carrying adult responsibilities since Jessica's illness, protecting her, sister holding her emotions in check. "You don't have to be the strong one anymore," he said gently. "That's my job now." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes revealing a vulnerability she rarely showed. "Promise?" "I promise." It was a vow he intended to keep for the rest of his life. When she finally fell asleep against his shoulder, Ethan carefully carried her upstairs to her bed. As he tucked the blanket around her, he whispered, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." In her sleep, Olivia smiled. The Massachusetts autumn painted Jamaica Plain in brilliant hues of red and gold, transforming their neighborhood into a canvas of color. 3 months had passed since Charlotte's illness, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm that sometimes made Ethan marvel at how quickly everything had changed. This crisp Saturday morning found them all at Franklin Park, the twins racing ahead on the leaf-strewn path while Ethan and Margaret followed at a more measured pace. "James called again yesterday," Margaret remarked, hands tucked in her jacket pockets. "Your partner seems quite persistent." Ethan nodded, watching Charlotte attempt a cartwheel while Olivia offered critical commentary. "The London acquisition is moving forward. He wants me there for the signing." "Are you going?" There was no judgment in Margaret's tone, just curiosity. "I've arranged to handle it remotely," Ethan replied. "The girls have their fall concert next week." Margaret smiled slightly. Jessica wouldn't believe this conversation. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID made him hesitate. His mother, who rarely called. "Aren't you going to answer?" Margaret asked. He sighed and accepted the call. "Hello, Mother." Eleanor Reynolds' crisp voice filled his ear. "Ethan, darling, we've booked our flights. We'll arrive Wednesday afternoon." Ethan froze. "What flights?" "To Boston, of course. Your father finally has a break in his schedule. We want to meet our granddaughters, his parents, coming here." The thought sent a wave of anxiety through him. "Mother, this isn't a good time." "Nonsense. It's been months since you told us about them. How much longer do you expect us to wait?" After extracting flight details and ending the call, Ethan found himself under Margaret's knowing gaze. "Your parents?" she asked. He nodded grimly. "They're coming Wednesday." "The girls should meet their grandparents," Margaret said, her voice gentler than expected. "You don't know my parents." Ahead of them, Olivia had found a particularly magnificent red maple leaf and was showing it to Charlotte. "Dad," she called, waving him over with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "Look at this one. It's perfect for my collection." The simple joy in her voice, the easy way she now called him Dad. These were precious gifts he'd once thought impossible. How would his critical, perfectionist parents affect the delicate trust they'd built? That evening, after the girls were asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at old family photographs. His childhood home had been beautiful but cold, his parents distant figures who valued achievement over emotional connection. A soft sound made him look up. Olivia stood in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook, her head sitting across from him. Her eyes fell on the photographs. "Who are they?" "My parents." "Your grandparents." Olivia studied the formal portrait. "They look serious." Ethan couldn't help smiling at her accurate assessment. "They are. Very serious." "Are they nice?" The question held genuine curiosity. Ethan considered how to answer truthfully without prejudicing her. "They're different from Margaret. They weren't very affectionate when I was growing up." Olivia absorbed this, her eyes moving between the photograph and Ethan's face. "Is that why you weren't at first? With us?" The insight caught him off guard. "Maybe. Yes, probably." She nodded sagely. "But you're learning." "I am," he agreed, touched by her perception. "When are they coming?" "Wednesday." "But you don't have to." "I want to meet them," Olivia interrupted with unexpected firmness. "They're family too, right?" Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Pride, perhaps, at her willingness to open her heart again despite past hurts. "Right," he said softly. "They're family too." Eleanor and Richard Reynolds arrived precisely at 2 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, stepping from their hired car with the polished appearance that had defined them throughout Ethan's childhood. His mother's critical gaze swept over the modest colonial house with its autumn decorations and children's bicycles on the porch. "Quaint," she remarked, the word hovering between compliment and criticism. Inside, the twins waited in the living room, dressed in their best clothes at Charlotte's insistence. Margaret stood protectively nearby, her expression carefully neutral. "Mother, Father," Ethan said formally, "I'd like you to meet Charlotte and Olivia." Charlotte stepped forward first, offering her hand as Ethan had coached her. "It's nice to meet you, grandmother." Eleanor's composed facade cracked slightly at the sight of her granddaughter. "My goodness," she murmured, "you have the Reynolds eyes." Richard remained stiffer, nodding politely at the girls. "Well, they're certainly healthy-looking children." Olivia, who had said nothing so far, suddenly spoke. "Did you bring pictures of Dad when he was little?" The question seemed to catch Eleanor off guard. Well, I suppose I might have some in my phone." "Mom always took pictures of us," Olivia continued. "She said memories are important." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by Margaret offering tea. As the adults moved to the dining room, Ethan noticed his father hanging back, studying the family photos on the wall. "This was their mother?" Richard asked quietly, indicating a picture of Jessica with the twins. Ethan nodded. "Yes." Something unreadable crossed his father's face. "She was very young. She was 34 when she died," Ethan replied, a defensive edge in his voice. Richard glanced at him sharply. "That's not what I meant. I meant when she had them, when she left you." Before Ethan could respond, Olivia appeared beside them. "Do you want to see my rock collection?" she asked Richard unexpectedly. "Dad helped me organize it by type." Richard blinked in surprise, then nodded stiffly. "I suppose I could have a look." As tea progressed, Eleanor maintained her composure, asking polite questions about the girls' schooling and activities. But when Charlotte excitedly described their new ritual of Sunday pancake breakfasts, something softened in Eleanor's expression. "Your father used to request pancakes every birthday," she revealed, surprising Ethan with this glimpse into a childhood memory he'd forgotten. "With blueberries, arranged in a smiley face." Charlotte's eyes widened. "Dad does the same thing for us." The connection, however small, seemed to shift something in the room's atmosphere. Later, as Richard examined Olivia's carefully labeled rock specimens, he mentioned offhandedly, "I collected rocks as a boy in Vermont. My father thought it was a waste of time. Dad thinks it's important," Olivia replied. "He says hobbies develop scientific thinking." Richard glanced at his son with an expression Ethan couldn't quite decipher. The evening concluded with tentative plans for dinner the following night. As the elder Reynolds prepared to leave, Eleanor paused at the door. "They're remarkable children, Ethan," she said quietly. "You seem different with them." "I am different," he acknowledged. Eleanor nodded, an unusual hesitancy in her typically decisive demeanor. "Perhaps we could all learn something from that." After they'd gone, Margaret tactfully retreated to her apartment, leaving Ethan alone with the twins. "Well, what did you think?" he asked cautiously. Charlotte bounced on the sofa. "Grandmother has pretty jewelry, and she said I have proper posture." Olivia was more measured. "Grandfather knows a lot about rocks. He's quiet, like you sometimes." "Like me?" Ethan hadn't considered any similarities between himself and his father. Olivia nodded. "But you smile more. I think you're a better dad than he was." The simple observation hit Ethan with unexpected force. In trying to break the cycle, to be different from his own emotionally distant father, he had somehow succeeded in his daughter's eyes. "Thank you, Olivia," he said softly. "That means everything to me." 1 year from the day he discovered his daughters. Ethan stood once again at Jessica's grave in Rose Hill Cemetery. But this time, he wasn't alone. Charlotte and Olivia stood beside him, their small hands clasped in his. The autumn wind still swept through the cemetery, but today it carried golden leaves instead of biting cold. Charlotte placed a bouquet of yellow daisies, Jessica's favorite, against the headstone. Olivia set down a framed photograph beside it. "We brought you something, Mom," she said softly. Ethan looked at the photograph, taken just last week at Charlotte's birthday celebration. It showed all of them, the twins, Ethan, Margaret, even his parents, who had gradually become regular visitors. They were gathered around a cake, laughing at something Charlotte had said. A real family, pieced together from broken parts. "I think she'd like that picture," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the emotion tightening his chest. Charlotte nodded. She always wanted us to be happy. They stood in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Ethan marveled at how much had changed in a year. His corporate office now held children's artwork alongside financial reports. His calendar prioritized school events over business meetings. His heart, once focused solely on success, now understood what truly mattered. Olivia, ever perceptive, looked up at him. "Are you sad, Dad?" "A little," he admitted. "I wish your mom could see you now, see us." "Margaret says she can," Charlotte offered. "Just not with regular eyes." Ethan smiled at her innocent wisdom. "Margaret is usually right." As they walked back toward the cemetery entrance, Olivia suddenly took his hand, a gesture that once would have been unthinkable. "Dad?" Her voice held a thoughtfulness beyond her years. "Do you think everything happens for a reason?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure, but I think sometimes good things can come even from sad situations." She nodded, processing this. "Like you finding us because we were visiting Mom?" "Exactly like that." Charlotte skipped ahead, then turned back, her face brightening. "Race you to the car. Last one there has to help with dishes tonight." Olivia immediately dropped Ethan's hand and sprinted after her sister. Ethan followed more slowly, watching. His daughters run through the dappled sunlight, their laughter carrying on the breeze. At the cemetery gates he paused, looking back at Jessica's grave one last time. "Thank you," he whispered, certain somehow that she could hear him. "For them, for this second chance." The wind seemed to lift in response, carrying golden leaves in a gentle swirl around him before settling again. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Margaret included as always, Charlotte regaled them with elaborate plans for her science project, while Olivia offered practical suggestions for improvement. Ethan watched them, these extraordinary girls who had transformed his life in ways he never imagined possible. Once, he had measured success in dollars and deals, acquisitions and assets. Now he measured it in moments. Charlotte's triumphant smile when she mastered a difficult math problem. Olivia's rare but genuine laughter during family game nights. The way they both still climbed into his bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort he was finally able to give. "Dad, you're not listening," Charlotte complained, interrupting his thoughts. "Sorry, sweetheart." "What were you saying?" As Charlotte launched back into her explanation, Ethan caught Olivia watching him with that perceptive gaze that reminded him so much of Jessica. She smiled slightly, a private communication between them. In that smile was understanding, forgiveness, and something that had taken months to build: trust. They had come full circle. The broken pieces had been gathered, examined, and reassembled into something new, something stronger and more beautiful than before. It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult days, still moments when the absence of Jessica felt like a physical pain. But they faced them together now, as a family, and that made all the difference.